is running out of time in the AI race. कम से कम कोटक महिंद्रा बैंक के फाउंडर उदय कोटक की लेटेस्ट वार्निंग को सुनने के बाद तो यही लगता है। दुनिया की बड़ी बड़ी कंपनीज आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस पर रिकॉर्ड पैसा खर्च कर रही हैं। कोटक का मानना है कि जब बाकी दुनिया फ्यूचर बिल्ड करने में इतनी बिजी है, तब इंडिया को भी सिर्फ देखना नहीं, इन्वेस्ट करना शुरू करना होगा। बिकॉज एवरी टेक्नोलॉजी रेवोल्यूशन क्रिएट्स टू काइंड्स ऑफ विनर्स। एक वो जो टेक्नोलॉजी यूज करते हैं, यानी कंट्रीज लाइक इंडिया, और दूसरे वो जो उन टेक्नोलॉजी को बिल्ड करते हैं, ओन करते हैं और उससे वेल्थ क्रिएट करते हैं, यानी अमेरिका जैसी कंट्रीज। फॉर द लास्ट 20 years, India has been incredibly good at the first part. We became one of the world's biggest internet markets, one of the biggest smartphone markets, one of the biggest user bases for almost every major digital platform. लेकिन सोचिए, गूगल दुनिया का डिफॉल्ट सर्च इंजन कैसे बना? इंस्टाग्राम पर हम इतना टाइम क्यों स्पेंड करते हैं? Amazon क्लाउड से इतना पैसा कैसे कमाता है? और NVIDIA नाम की कंपनी, जिसके बारे में बहुत लोगों ने कुछ सालों पहले तक सुना भी नहीं था, AI बूम की सबसे बड़ी विनर्स में से एक कैसे बन गई? आपने भी ये सारे प्लेटफॉर्म्स डेफिनेटली यूज किए होंगे। इनफैक्ट इंडिया हेल्प्ड गिव दीज प्लेटफॉर्म्स स्केल. But when those companies created massive wealth, when their valuations exploded and their shareholders made fortunes, most of that value was created somewhere else, not in India. So where does India actually stand today? At a time when America and China are pouring billions into AI, semiconductors, space and other future technologies, is India doing enough? क्या हम AI रेस में genuinely late हैं? अगर हैं तो क्यों? क्या प्रॉब्लम टैलेंट की थी, कैपिटल की या पॉलिसी की? या फिर हम प्रोडक्ट्स को सिर्फ यूज करने में इतने बिजी हो गए कि उनको बनाने पर हमारा फोकस ही नहीं गया? तो इंडिया एआई रेस में कहां खड़ा है, ये जानने से पहले इस वीडियो को लाइक करें और चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन। इज इंडिया एक्चुअली लेट टू द एआई रेस? The answer is not as straightforward as you might think. Because if you go by the headlines, it almost feels like India has just started taking AI seriously. But that's not the case. Contrary to popular belief, India's AI story did not begin in 2022, the year when ChatGPT was launched in India. It began in 2018. 2018 में जब ज़्यादातर लोग AI के बारे में एक्टिवली सोच भी नहीं रहे थे, नीति आयोग ने एक रिपोर्ट पब्लिश की. It was called AI for All. India had officially recognized that AI was going to be a big deal and that the country needed to prepare for it. The idea was that AI could transform everything from healthcare and agriculture to education and urban infrastructure. India had indeed spotted the opportunity early, which makes the next question even more interesting. If we saw AI coming, why aren't we among the front runners today? Over the next few years, India started putting pieces of the AI ecosystem in place. In 2020, the government launched the National AI Portal with NASSCOM and NITI. The idea was to create a one-stop platform for everything happening in India's AI ecosystem. The same year, the government also launched a program called Responsible AI for Youth in partnership with Intel. The goal was to introduce AI skills to school students years before AI became a mainstream conversation. Then came October of 2020. In the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, India organized RAISE 2020, a global AI summit inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The event brought together policymakers, researchers, startups and technology leaders to discuss India's AI ambition and how AI could be used in areas like healthcare, education, agriculture and finance. On paper, things seemed to be moving in the right direction. But around the same time, something much bigger was happening outside India. In June 2020, OpenAI released GPT-3. At the time, most people had never heard of it. But in the AI world, it was a big deal. For the first time, people were seeing a language model that could write essays, answer questions, and generate surprisingly human-like text. While India was talking about how AI could be used, companies in the US were already spending huge amounts of money trying to build the underlying models themselves. In other words, India's AI conversation was largely about applications. America's AI conversation was increasingly about ownership. And over the next 2 years, that gap would become impossible to ignore. 2021 was the time when the AI race started to accelerate within the technology industry. Microsoft deepened its relationship with OpenAI, Google ramped up its AI research efforts, NVIDIA became increasingly important because the GPUs needed to train advanced AI models were largely coming from one company. At the time, none of this was front-page news. Then November 22 happened. OpenAI released ChatGPT. Within days, millions of people were trying it. Within months, it became one of the fastest growing consumer applications in history. And that's when India's position started coming under the spotlight. Because once the excitement around ChatGPT settled, a more uncomfortable question emerged. Where was India's version of this story? In June 2023, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman visited India. During an event, he was asked whether Indian startups could build something comparable to ChatGPT. He said trying to build a model like ChatGPT with a very small budget would be hopeless. The comment triggered a debate across India's startup and technology ecosystem. Among those who pushed back was Infosys co-founder Nandan Nilekani. Speaking later that year, Nilekani argued that India should focus on building AI at scale for its own needs, particularly across Indian languages and public digital infrastructure. Around the same time, another debate was gathering pace. If India had the engineers, the startups, and one of the world's largest digital population, then what exactly was stopping it from building world-class AI models? The answer, according to many experts, came down to something much less glamorous than talent: computing power. By 2023, the world's most advanced AI models were being trained on tens of thousands of NVIDIA GPUs. Access to compute had become a competitive advantage in itself. And that is the backdrop against which the government announced the IndiaAI Mission in March 2024 with a budget of over 10,000 crore rupees. One of the biggest components of IndiaAI Mission was compute access. In other words, 6 years after NITI Aayog's AI for All report, the conversation had finally evolved. In April 2025, Bengaluru-based startup Sarvam AI was selected to build India's sovereign large language model under the IndiaAI Mission. Soon after, the mission selected additional startups to build indigenous foundation models. At the same time, the government's shared AI compute infrastructure expanded to more than 34,000 GPUs. India has one of the world's largest AI talent pools and one of the highest AI adoption rates. Yet, private AI investment in India remains a fraction of what flows in the United States. In 2025, private AI investment in the US reached nearly $286 billion. China, which everyone sees as America's closest rival, invested around $12.4 billion in the same year. That's still 23 times less than the US. India's government, on the other hand, pledged 10,000 crore rupees or roughly $1.25 billion for AI under its IndiaAI Mission, which for context is less than what Google announced it would spend building a single data hub in Visakhapatnam. Now, India doesn't seem to have a talent problem for sure. Stanford's AI Index ranks India among the world's leading AI talent hubs. The bigger question is why the talent is not attracting capital at the same scale. And perhaps that is what Uday Kotak is really pointing towards. The gap is not merely about technology. It's about investment. It's about who is willing to take risks. And it's about who is willing to spend aggressively on the future. Today, India's technology sector generates nearly $300 billion in annual revenue. It employs more than 5 million people. Software services and IT exports form one of the most important pillars of India's economy. It created global technology giants like TCS, Infosys, HCL Tech and Wipro. The sector contributes roughly 6% to India's entire GDP. This is the engine of India's middle class, the dream job for millions of India's engineering graduates. But AI is beginning to challenge some of those assumptions that made this model so successful. Because many of the tasks AI is getting better at are the same tasks that helped fuel India's service economy. Writing code, testing software, preparing documentation, customer support, back office operation, or data processing. A 2025 EY analysis found that entry-level IT roles have already declined by 20 to 25% due to automation. NITI Aayog itself warned that AI could displace up to 2 million jobs in India's tech services sector by 2031. The World Economic Forum projects AI could make 92 million jobs obsolete globally by 2030. In fact, at a NASSCOM event, HCL Tech CEO C. Vijay Kumar spoke about a future where companies could potentially generate twice the revenue with half the workforce. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that India's technology industry is in trouble, but it does suggest that the industry may be entering its biggest transition since the outsourcing boom began. Interestingly, in 2024, India received more than $129 billion in remittances, the highest in the world. A meaningful share of that money comes from skilled Indian professionals working overseas, many of whom built their careers through the global technology industry. Now, if AI changes the economics of software development and technology employment globally, the effects may not be limited to technology companies. Over time, they could ripple through migration patterns, overseas employment, and even remittance flows. Then there is the intellectual property question. When a country builds a successful AI model, it doesn't just create a product. It creates intellectual property that can be licensed, improved, monetized, and exported. Now, if an Indian startup builds on top of OpenAI's models, the application may be Indian, but the underlying model, the foundational technology, and a significant portion of that value chain still belongs elsewhere. Which brings us back to the central question of this entire story. Can India remain one of the world's largest users of technology and still capture a meaningful share of the value being created? Or does the AI era require a different approach altogether? In February 2026, India hosted its first major AI summit, the India AI Impact Summit in New Delhi. The guest list included the biggest names in the world of AI. So there is a genuine effort to push for momentum in the field. What India still does not have is globally competitive frontier model, a major AI platform operating at global scale, or anything close to the level of capital being deployed by the United States or China. Which is why the honest answer to where India stands today is neither optimistic nor pessimistic. India is not absent from the AI race for sure, but it is also not leading it. And in a race where technology, capital, and talent are moving this quickly, the middle of the pack can be an uncomfortable place to be.